Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi mining community, welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And today's guest is Basil Botha, who's the co-founder, CEO and director of Greentech, who are a fast growing recycling company for the processing and recycling of electronic waste. Basil is an experienced mining operator with over 4 decades of experience in mining minerals and metals, and has been involved in a number of bulls over during his career. He's going to tell us a little bit more about Greentech and what they are looking to achieve. So that's welcome, Basil, to the podcast. How you doing, Basil?
I'm well, thanks, Rob. Thank you for, let's get into it, yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking your time. And you're based in Canada, and today is a national holiday for you, so I appreciate you coming online to do this podcast. As we always start these podcasts off, I wonder if you can tell the audience a little bit about yourself and about your background and your career. So they got a little bit of understanding about yourself and what you've done in the mining industry.
Sure thing. I originally hail from Africa, where I sort of started my career out in the mining business. Worked for a German mining company. They shipped me all over the world in various positions. Essentially cut my teeth in the coal business, and then formed what I would say is a very successful coal mining company in South Africa, which we finally sold in about 1994. And then I moved to Canada, and of course Canada's sort of the epicenter of the mining business, along with Australia and a couple of other countries. And as a result of that, I got involved in the mining business, exploration in this neck of the woods, and worked in many different countries. And essentially, the last operation that I was involved with was a bankrupt gold mine in Finland, which we put back into production, a 70,000 ounce producer. The grades were 1.5 grams per ton. The mill feed was about 6,500 tons per day. I'll get to that and explain the ramifications, why I'm mentioning that up front. But yeah, so I've been on the exploration side, the mining side, put mines into production. I know what it takes to put a mine into production. So, looking at the electronic waste business was quite a revelation.
So yeah, just wondering if you can tell us a little bit about Greentech and what you do in the recycling of electronic waste.
Yeah. Back in 2019, my business partner and I came across a project down in the US, which was electronic waste recycling. What really caught our attention was the fact that, you could extract gold, silver, palladium, platinum, copper, tin, and there's a host of 30 other different metals associated with it. So it kind of tweaked our interest, and we were coming off the project in Finland. So we shot down to the US, and it made so much more sense to recycle electronic waste as opposed to digging holes in the ground. Not that I'm opposed to digging a hole in the ground, because that's essentially where most of the metals come from. But the ramifications as opposed to mining are so much better, although to a certain extent, if you're mining hard rock, you're also mining e-waste, because there's a prolific amount of it throughout the world. So that really tweaked our interest, and from there we sort of developed a process whereby we could ship the e-waste into the process, separate the plastics out, take the metal, and then refine the metals. I can go into that a little bit more in detail later on in the discussion.
What are the benefits to recycling and obviously recovering precious and other metals, as opposed to obviously mining them traditionally?
Yeah.
And also, is there any particular metals that you actually get from this electronic waste?
Yeah. So the benefits of electronic waste recycling as opposed to mining is, mining is a tough business. I mean, to take a gold mine from inception to production can take you 12, 15, 20 years. And then you're dealing with geopolitical, environmental, you're dealing with um, the rabbits and the owls, and I mean, it just goes on and on and on, and then tailings ponds, etc. So it takes a long time. It costs an inordinate amount of money to put, say, a 70,000 ounce gold producing mine into production. So when you look at the comparatives of taking electronic waste and producing a 70,000 ounce gold equivalent, you look at, number one, what's it going to cost you? And the cost, as an example, in Finland, the mine capex was about 200 million euros. So to do the same comparative 70,000 ounce gold producer, the capex is in the order of about 13 million. So it's significantly less. The other thing is to get it actually into production. The time period is about 6 months from start to finish, and that's sort of start your permitting process, etc. And you can be, once you start the build out, you can be producing a gold equivalent ounce product within about 8 months. So what we take out predominantly is gold, silver, platinum, palladium, copper, tin, and as I mentioned before, there's 30 other different metals in there. There's rare earths, there's nickel, cobalt, the list goes on and on and on in minuscule amounts, but nevertheless, they're still there. So just recycling electronic waste, just looking at the comparative is so much more compelling.
And how difficult is it to segregate all those different types of metals?
Good question, Rob. Something that we didn't really understand at the beginning when we looked at the project. At the front of it, we found that various different ways. The big recyclers in the business generally take all the electronic waste, they toss it into a furnace and burn it. We didn't want to do that because of emissions and permitting. Then we'd be stuck with 2 years of permitting because, you're sending stuff up the stack. So I looked, based on my mining experience, I looked at other ways to process this. And number one, we're dealing with predominantly printed circuit boards. So we'll put them into a processing, shredding, grinding, secondary grinding, third grinding, and then an air separation, whereby we separate the plastics and we take out the metal concentrate. And from the metal concentrate, we'll run it through a refining business, a refining process, and that is take out the copper. So we'll produce a copper 999 copper ingot, and then we'll take it and we'll refine out the gold and then the silver, and then the third process to take the platinum, palladium, and tin. So, putting all those metals together. So, for example, as I mentioned, in Finland, we would mine 100,000 tons a day to get 6,500 tons of product that we could feed through the mill, and the average grade was 1.5 grams. Whereas in the electronic recycling business, we'll only be processing 27 tons a day to capture on an annual basis a 70,000 ounce gold equivalent producer. Predominantly, the metal that's coming out there value-wise is gold, and that's around about 36,000 ounces per annum. But if you add all the others up, it comes to about 75,000 gold equivalent ounces. So the process, although we spent about 4 years perfecting the process, it's purely mechanical in the front end, and then in the back end, it's a refining process. So unlike, again, Finland, where we produce a doré, we are producing fine metals. And the reason we're producing fine metals is that's because what we are dealing with on the input end. So the process is remarkably different to what has traditionally been done in this business, where, as I mentioned, the big refiners burn the material. We don't. So there's zero emission and zero discharge. No tailings ponds or anything like that.
What sets you apart from obviously the big recyclers like Eurobus, Unicor, Boliden and Glencore? Obviously you mentioned they burn everything. What is there any of the other differences that sets you apart?
No, I would say that was our biggest struggle, was based on how do we get this throughput without having to go through a 2-year emission environmental process, whereby, dry end. So I don't know if you can picture in your mind, but shredding, grinding, and then an air separation, and then your concentrate. So that essentially is, there's no dioxins going into the atmosphere, there's no sulfur, the list goes on and on and on. And Europe, or even Eastern Europe, where we're planning to set up in Serbia, they are pretty strict on environmental. Let's not delude ourselves. In fact, I think the EU is worse than North America, to be quite frank. So we didn't want to go down that route at all. We wanted a clean process. That's the difference.
And I suppose, where do you actually get the electronic waste from? Is there particular types of electronic waste, various products? Is it any product, or is it particular products that you would tend to use?
Yeah, one of the compelling things that attracted us as well was we looked at a whole bunch of data. One of the really good pieces of information is the Global E-Waste Monitor 2024, whereby e-waste is in the order of about 60 odd million tons per year, which has been generated. And by 2030, it's projected to grow to 74 million tons. Unlike a gold mine, you're dealing with a diminishing resource. In the e-waste business, you're dealing with a growing resource. So that was another compelling aspect of it. And yeah, there's copper wire, there's brass, tin, lead, zinc. There's a whole bunch of different things, but we focus really on printed circuit boards, where the metals are quite highly concentrated. And it's very compelling with the amount of e-waste around. Where do we get it from? It's a global phenomena. I'll give you an example. Glencore have 30 suppliers from 100 different countries. That's how they ship into Quebec, as an example. So it floats around the globe, and you've got to have somebody really on it, sourcing electronic waste all the time. And of course, the what we term as OEMs, original equipment manufacturers like Dell, Apple, this goes on, Samsung, they also have scrap in their processes as well. So those are, the focus to try and get contracts with these big e-waste generators so that we can recycle in a circular economy. That's where it's really going.
Where are you looking to set up your next project? And I suppose the rough timeframes from start to finish.
Yeah, the next project will be in Serbia, and Serbia for a number of different reasons. They have free zones where corporate tax is 15%. There's no VAT when you're based in these free zones. You also, if we're importing, and we will be importing electronic waste, you tax exempt from import duties. So that's quite compelling. The other aspect is from start to finish. Once we pull the plug, we estimate about 8 months, tops 10 months to when product is being produced. So the time frame is extremely short, and that includes, as I mentioned before, permitting, acquiring the land or acquiring a building, building it out. It's a fairly, compared to mining, not a complicated process. Your biggest number one criteria is feedstock. So the process is short. I mean, there's no question about it.
And lastly, what's the outlook for Greentech over the sort of next 6 to 12 months?
To be in production, I'll know more when I'm in Serbia at the end of the month. But we intend to grow this business exponentially. So the next 6 to 10 months is push the material through, become a credible supplier of fine metals, either to the LBME, London Bullion Metal Exchange, or various other entities. We are members of the Jewelry Council in Europe. They accredit you to sell to jewelers because people want a clean, sustainable product. And then we intend to grow it into North Africa, potentially, in either Spain, Portugal. I mean, this is such what we would term as a hub and spoke. We would use the hub in Serbia, and the spoke would be dotted around the globe in terms of supplying concentrate into Serbia. So the outlook overall, from a mining perspective, we could grow this in the next 5 years to at least a 250,000 gold equivalent ounce producer, and also our all-in sustaining costs are in the region of about $1,400. So we're in the ballpark of mining. So that's why we correlated very closely to the mining or the gold mining business per se.
Basil, really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on the podcast and educating us on electronic waste. And good luck with the year ahead with Greentech. If our audience wants to follow your story, if they've got any questions that they may want to ask, how can they go about doing that? What social media platform channels are you on?
Yeah, if they come to the website, it's www.greentech-metals.com. Gladly answer any questions that the public want. We are in the process of raising another 5 million euros. We already, as I mentioned, have the commitment for about 15 million. So happy to entertain that, and happy to answer any questions.
That's great. Basil, really appreciate your time. Have a wonderful 2024, and hopefully you'll raise that extra money, get things started, and perhaps you want to come on the podcast next year and give us an update.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it, and I'll keep you posted.
Yeah, thank you. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Electronic waste. I don't think we've had really anyone speak about that before. So as always, appreciate your continued support. Please keep sharing this episode far and wide across the world, so we can educate our mining industry. And until next time, happy.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.